When Jackie Chan enters the stage of Vanessa Cross's famous talk show, the audience is expecting another of his charismatic and inspiring interviews. But Vanessa isn't interested in tributes or touching moments. Her aim is different: to provoke, test, and expose the martial arts star's vulnerabilities. But as soon as Jackie sits down, the atmosphere changes. With a sharp smile, Vanessa shows off her question cards. What should be a friendly chat is about to turn into something much bigger. What Vanessa doesn't realize is that, in a few minutes, she'll be the one left speechless. What Jackie Chan would say that night would change everything, and no one in the audience would ever forget it. Before we continue with this story, tell us, where are you watching from? If you like stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we'll have another special story for you. The studio is packed. The stage lights shine brightly, highlighting every detail of the elegant set. In the center of the auditorium, the audience murmurs, holding up colorful posters with messages of affection and admiration. Some of them stand out. "Jackie, you're a legend. Thank you for inspiring us with your humility." Behind the scenes, the movement of cameras and technical staff indicates that the big moment is about to happen. On the big screen, the countdown flashes. The lights reflect against the backdrop of the stage, creating a cinematic atmosphere worthy of a great show. Then he appears. Jackie Chan strides across the stage with confident but unassuming steps. His presence has a unique magnetism, a simple but striking energy. He wears an unfussy black suit, and a serene smile hangs on his lips. The audience bursts into applause. Some shout his name, others simply watch him, filled with silent admiration. There is something about Jackie Chan that conveys humility and strength at the same time. He raises his hand in a discreet gesture of thanks and sits down in the center seat of the stage. The atmosphere vibrates with a mixture of respect and anticipation. On the other side of the table, maintaining impeccable posture, is Vanessa Cross, a renowned journalist known for her sharp questions and relentless interviews. Her show is famous for exploring vulnerabilities, revealing uncomfortable truths, and in some cases, destroying reputations. She wears an elegant blazer and keeps her hair in an impeccable bun. With a handful of cards in her hand and an analytical gaze, she is not there to flatter. Her lips curve into a smile that mixes professionalism and provocation. She studies Jackie for a few seconds before leaning forward. Then her firm, controlled voice echoes in the studio. "Jackie, you have fame, fortune. You could live in absolute luxury, but instead you prefer to do your own stunts, donate millions to charity, and avoid ostentation. Do you really think that makes a difference in the world?" The studio falls silent. The audience stirs, sensing the provocation in the question. Some people frown, uncomfortable. Others wait anxiously for the answer. But Jackie Chan doesn't hesitate. He keeps his posture relaxed, takes a deep breath, and reflects for a brief moment. Then he looks directly at Vanessa and replies with a gentle smile. "Vanessa, have you ever stopped to think about how many people feel invisible every day?" The weight of the sentence spreads through the studio. The audience falls silent. Some expressions change, touched by the simplicity and depth of the answer. Vanessa raises an eyebrow, surprised at how easily Jackie deflects the provocation without losing her composure. But she's still not satisfied. She glances quickly at her cards, sliding her fingers across the paper. Her eyes shine with implacable intent. She still has a card up her sleeve. She leans a little closer. The studio, once full of excitement, now plunges into a tense silence. Jackie Chan's last answer had an unexpected impact. Some spectators exchange glances. Others put their hands in their laps, reflecting on what they've just heard. But Vanessa Cross isn't finished yet. She crosses her legs, adjusting her posture with calculated elegance. A subtle smile creeps up the corners of her lips, but her eyes shine with implacable coldness. She throws the next card on the table without haste. She lets the suspense take over the studio. Then without hesitation she fires, "Jackie, you lost your father at a young age. You faced difficult times. You were humiliated before achieving success. You were betrayed by colleagues." She pauses, letting the words hang in the air. Then she adds, "Didn't that destroy you? Don't you think that in the end it all comes down to pain?" The impact of the question is immediate. The studio holds its breath. Some people cover their mouths, shocked by the brutality of the question. Some frown, visibly uncomfortable with Vanessa's harsh and insensitive tone when addressing such a delicate subject. Jackie lowers his head. He interlaces his fingers on his knees. For a moment, silence dominates the studio. The cameras focus on his face. His eyes, normally full of energy and serenity, now reveal something deeper. A silent storm. Memories. Loss. Scars that words cannot describe. Vanessa watches him carefully. She waits for a sign of weakness. A moment of doubt. But then, Jackie Chan looks up. He takes a deep breath and replies quietly, "Pain has never destroyed me. It taught me." The studio becomes tense. The audience holds its breath. He continues, "She taught me that nothing is permanent, that every moment matters, and that true love never disappears." A deep silence takes over the studio. The eyes of some members of the audience glisten with restrained tears. A woman in the front row discreetly takes a handkerchief and wipes her eyes. Even those who don't know her personal story feel the weight and truth of her words. The camera turns to Vanessa. For the first time, her sharp smile disappears. For a brief moment, her expression mixes surprise and perhaps a little regret. But Vanessa is not the type to back down. She straightens her shoulders, disguises any hesitation, and slides her fingers over her question cards. Her next move is already decided. She intends to hit Jackie where he least expects it. The weight of what has just happened still hangs over the studio. The audience is more restrained, some still absorbing Jackie Chan's words. But Vanessa has no intention of holding back. She regains her confident posture, flashes a rehearsed smile, and flips through the cards in her hands with apparent nonchalance. But she already knows exactly what she's going to ask. She leans forward slightly. Her eyes narrow, calculating. Her tone changes. It's less aggressive now. It's a carefully planned trap. "Jackie, you're over 60. She pauses, leaving the question hanging in the air. "Hollywood is no longer interested in action stars your age." Another moment of silence. Then she asks the final question. "Aren't you afraid of becoming irrelevant?" The audience's reaction is immediate. Some murmur, surprised by the coldness of the question. Others frown, uncomfortable with the direct attack. But Jackie doesn't answer immediately. He rubs his fingers thoughtfully. His gaze wanders for a moment, as if he were traveling to a distant place. A place only he knows. Vanessa notices the pause and smiles internally. It was the moment she had been waiting for. Then, Jackie Chan raises his eyes. He looks directly at her. His face remains serene, but his expression carries a weight that no one expected. He smiles slightly, and then he asks a question that no one saw coming. "Vanessa, have you ever seen a sunset?" The journalist blinks, momentarily surprised. The audience is confused. She hesitates. "What?" Jackie continues. Her voice is soft but full of meaning. "A sunset is beautiful." He pauses, letting the words echo through the studio. "But have you ever heard anyone call it irrelevant just because it's getting dark?" For a moment, no one moves. Then the studio erupts in applause. Shouts of support echo through the audience. "Yes! Bravo, Jackie! That was incredible." Vanessa is paralyzed. She completely loses control of the interview. Her countenance changes. The rehearsed smile disappears. In its place comes an indecipherable expression. Surprise. And perhaps a trace of respect. Jackie didn't strike back in anger. He didn't play her game. He turned the provocation into a life lesson. For an instant, the whole structure of the interview collapses. Vanessa takes a deep breath. She needs to pull herself together. Her eyes slide over the question cards. She realizes she needs a new strategy. Her plan to destabilize Jackie isn't working, but she still has an alternative. If Jackie Chan doesn't fear irrelevance, perhaps she can touch something even deeper. The studio is still buzzing with Jackie's response. The public looks at him in a different way now. They don't just see a movie star. They see a man who has faced everything and still carries a pure heart. But Vanessa Cross isn't ready to give up. She feels frustration growing inside her. Her show isn't known for moments of inspiration. It's known for putting celebrities against the wall. She needs to regain control. Then she decides to go further. She attacks a different point, Jackie's past. She holds the card for the next question for a few seconds, as if weighing up her words. The atmosphere in the studio was thickening. The silence was no longer just a space between words, but a weight that everyone could feel in their chest. Vanessa Cross knew she had to be calculating. Her show was known for putting pressure on celebrities, for pulling out uncomfortable truths and pushing them to the limit. But so far, Jackie Chan wouldn't budge. So she decided to change tack. She leaned forward slightly, her voice now colder, sharper. "Jackie, you grew up without your father's presence." The audience reacted immediately. Murmurs could be heard. Some shifted in their seats, uncomfortable with the direction the interview was taking. Jackie remained silent. His gaze dropped for a moment as if he were traveling to a distant time, revisiting memories that had never been forgotten. Vanessa continued. "Your mother worked hard to support you." Another cutting silence. "Didn't you ever get angry about that?" The question hung in the air. The audience understood her intention. She wanted to poke at an old wound, a sensitive point in Jackie's life. But Jackie Chan didn't let himself be trapped. He took a deep breath, and when he finally looked up, there was no anger there. There was no resentment, just a serenity that no one expected. He smiled slightly. "My father taught me something very important." Vanessa frowned slightly. That wasn't the answer she was expecting. Jackie continued. "He taught me the kind of man I didn't want to become." The audience remained motionless. "And my mother, she taught me how to survive." Silence overtook the studio. A woman in the audience let out a discreet sob. Some people blinked repeatedly, trying to hold back tears. It was impossible to hear those words without feeling the weight of the truth they carried. Vanessa hesitated. She was used to having total control of her interviews. She asked the questions, dictated the pace, and unsettled her guests. But Jackie didn't play that game. He didn't react angrily. He didn't justify himself. He simply transformed each provocation into a reflection so powerful that in the end, it was Vanessa who seemed to be the one being interviewed. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She slid her fingers through the question cards, searching for a new strategy. Her plan was failing, but she still had one last card up her sleeve. If tapping into his past wasn't enough, maybe there was something even deeper. Fear. The fear of mortality itself. The entire studio was immersed in a strange energy, a silence charged with expectation. The audience was no longer watching a simple interview. They were witnessing something much bigger. Jackie Chan had turned every provocation into a life lesson. He disarmed Vanessa in a way that few others could. But Vanessa couldn't accept that. She straightened her jacket, took a deep breath, and raised her head. She was known for crumbling even the toughest. It was now or never. This time, there were no more cynical smiles, no more irony. She leaned forward slightly and, with a cold, calculated tone, asked, "Jackie, are you afraid?" Time seemed to stop. The audience held its breath. Time waits for no one. She paused, letting the weight of the sentence settle in. "Have you ever thought about what will happen when your time comes?" The impact of the question was brutal. This time, it wasn't about Hollywood. It wasn't about success. It wasn't about movies or box office. This question went beyond that. This question touched on the inevitable. Jackie Chan tilted his head slightly to the side. He didn't laugh. He didn't look away. He didn't try to soften it. He just took a deep breath. For the first time, the silence lasted longer than expected. Vanessa held her breath. The audience leaned forward, waiting for an answer. Then finally, Jackie spoke. "Vanessa, do you know the difference between fear and faith?" The journalist blinked, not immediately understanding. She opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. For the first time, Vanessa didn't have an answer ready. She expected resistance. She expected denial. She expected justification. But she didn't expect that. Jackie wasn't trying to win. He was just living his truth. Vanessa looked at the cards in her hand. She looked for something, anything. But suddenly, all the questions seemed empty. All the strategies she had planned no longer made sense. Because at that moment, it was no longer an interview. It was a life lesson. And Vanessa knew that Jackie Chan had won. Jackie Chan turned that interview into something much bigger, something that Vanessa Cross wasn't ready to face. She thought she was in control. She thought she was conducting a game of sharp questions and calculated answers. But Jackie changed the rules. He turned the interview into a conversation about life itself. And then, as she stared at her cards, Vanessa realized something. There was one last question, but this time it wasn't for him. It was for herself. A deeper question, a final question. Jackie looked up, and when she spoke again, her voice was just a whisper. What if no one remembers you when you're gone? The words fell through the air like a stone sinking into deep water. The audience could hardly breathe. For the first time in the entire interview, Jackie Chan didn't answer immediately. The weight of the question filled the studio. Vanessa waited. And this time, even Jackie seemed to sense the gravity of the silence. The words, almost ethereal, flickered in the void. What if no one remembers you when you're gone? It was the kind of question designed to upset someone, to bring out a hidden fear, to force them to confront their own insignificance. But Jackie wasn't shaken. Instead, he smiled softly. It wasn't an ironic smile. It wasn't a rehearsed smile. It was something deeper. He took a deep breath, and when he finally spoke, his voice was firm. The question is not what they will remember about me. He paused. He let the words settle in the air. And then he added, the question is, what will they remember about you? A visible wave went through the auditorium. Some people sighed softly. Others leaned back in their chairs, stunned by the unexpected turn of events. Others exchanged glances, realizing something that no one had noticed until now. Vanessa was on the other side of the question. The cameras focused on her face. Vanessa Cross, the woman who had built her career challenging the biggest names in Hollywood, now looked lost. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her fingers held the question cards, but she no longer looked at them. Because, perhaps for the first time in a long time, Vanessa didn't have an answer ready. The silence dragged on, and then something happened that nobody expected. A tear slid down Vanessa's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. The cameras caught everything. The movement of her throat as she swallowed. Her breathing became irregular. The whole studio felt that moment. Jackie watched her, but not with triumph, not with pride, just with silent understanding. Then he stood up. The studio was silent. There was no applause. There were no shouts from the audience. The enthusiasm gave way to something different, something deeper. People were still. Some discreetly wiped their eyes. Others just reflected. Vanessa Cross remained seated. The question cards, once her weapons, her shield, now lay forgotten on the table. She no longer needed them. Or perhaps, for the first time, she realized that she never had. The cameras were still on. The world was still watching. But Vanessa was no longer thinking about the audience or the headlines. She was thinking about herself. Jackie's words echoed in her mind. The question isn't what they'll remember about me. The question is, what will they remember about you? She lowered her gaze to the shiny surface of the table, and there, her own reflection stared back at her. For years, she had built her career on sharp words, relentless questioning, and the unshakable belief that exposing others gave her power. But now, for the first time, she felt exposed. The screen goes dark, and then one last message pops up. Life isn't about how long we live. It's about the impact we leave behind. Soft music begins to play. Reflective, gentle. This was the unforgettable interview that turned the tide against Vanessa Cross and proved why Jackie Chan is so much more than a movie star. But now I want to know, what do you think really matters at the end of your life? What will people remember about you? Leave your opinion in the comments. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And of course, subscribe to the channel for more stories that show the power of empathy, resilience, and choices that really matter. Want to be inspired even more? Click on one of the videos on the screen and discover another story that will touch your heart. See you in the next video.